Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranjaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavatina Ishtiki. Reading from Canto 3, Chapter 7, verse 39. Nimittani cha tasyeha proktani anagasuribihi swato gnanam kuta pumsam bhaktir vairagyameva va. Word to word translation. Nimittani, the source of knowledge. Cha, also. Tasya, of such knowledge. Iha, in this world. Proktani, mentioned. Anagha, spotless. Suribhi, by devotees. Swataha, self-sufficient. Jnanam, knowledge. Kutaha, how. Pumsam, of the living entity. Bhaktihi, devotional service. Vairagyam, detachment. Eva, certainly. Va, also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Spotless devotees of the world have mentioned the source of such knowledge. How could one have knowledge of devotional service and detachment without the help of such devotees? Purport. There are many inexperienced persons who advocate self-realization without the help of a spiritual master. They decry the necessity of the spiritual master and try themselves to take his place by propagating the theory that a spiritual master is not necessary. Srimad Bhagavatam, however, does not approve this viewpoint. Even the great transcendental scholar Vyasadeva had need of a spiritual master. And under the instruction of his spiritual master, Narada, he prepared this sublime literature, Srimad Bhagavatam. Even Lord Chaitanya, although he is Krishna himself, accepted a spiritual master. Even Lord Krishna accepted a spiritual master, Sandipani Muni, in order to be enlightened. And all the acharyas and saints of the world are spiritual masters. In Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna accepted Lord Krishna as a spiritual master, although there was no necessity of such a formal declaration. So in all cases, there is no question about the necessity of accepting a spiritual master. The only stipulation is that the spiritual master should be a bona fide. That is, the spiritual master must be in proper chain of disciplic succession called the Parampara system. Suris are great scholars, but they may not always be Hanaga or spotless. The Anaga Suri is one who is a pure devotee of the Lord. Those who are not pure devotees of the Lord or who want to be on an equal level with him are not Anaga Suri. Pure devotees have prepared many books of knowledge on the basis of authorized scriptures. Srila Rupa Goswami and his assistants, under the instructions of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, have all written various literature for the guidance of prospective devotees. And anyone who is very serious about raising himself to the standard of a pure devotee of the Lord must take advantage of those literatures. Let's offer some prayers and then we can discuss some points on this verse. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Urmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Abhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnapadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadhi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you, dear devotees, for joining. The first thought that came to my mind was, as it says in the Bhagavatam, the first canto, the first chapter, third verse, Srimad Bhagavatam is Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukhad amrita dharva samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. So, as I was reading this, the translation, spotless devotees of the Lord have mentioned the source of such knowledge. How could one have knowledge of devotional service and detachment with the help of such devotees? So, it kind of is reflecting how Srimad Bhagavatam is Kalpataror. It kind of fulfills all the desires and all the wishes that are needed in order to achieve the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Like as this verse says, it kind of talks about the entire the process that kind of is needed for attaining the knowledge of the Supreme Lord. So as we kind of all know, for any law for any learning, there are two main components. One of it is, first we'll have to identify what is the source of the knowledge, and then once we identify the source of knowledge, then comes the part where we have to approach some personality whom we feel is eligible in the whole discipline of that knowledge, and approach him, and then through him or her get the learning. And as this verse says, spotless devotees of the Lord have mentioned the source of such knowledge. So it also talks about what is the source of knowledge, and such knowledge, it basically is all the questions that Vidura as of now has asked Maitreya. And so it also talks about the source of knowledge, such knowledge, and it also helps us how can we get that knowledge. It says, without the mercy and the shelter of such devotees, how can we even kind of get to know the knowledge of devotional service. So it's kind of interesting that within just one verse, Srimad Bhagavatam has kind of covered everything that we needed to know. As Srila Prabhupada very famously says, every verse of Srimad Bhagavatam is even one verse. Even sometimes Srila Prabhupada also says that even one word, even one syllable of Srimad Bhagavatam is so potent that just by focusing on such one verse, we will be able to achieve everything that we needed to know. So now we'll discuss some things about, as it says, as for any process of learning, as we just discussed, we'll need to identify the source of the knowledge. And once we identify the source of knowledge, let's also see how we can approach the teacher, and who is a teacher, and how do we approach him. So for identifying the source of the knowledge, we can kind of go, like, as we all know, the creator is Brahma. So if somebody kind of knows, so many a times, I don't think it's as much applicable to my generation and the next generations, but especially for somebody who was born till 80s and till that time, if they have to understand something that they have bought from any shop or anything, the main thing that they would rely was on the user's manual. So Brahma being the creator, we can kind of rely on kind of a user manual per se, that the Brahma Samhita that he has so well spoken. In the first verse of Brahma Samhita itself, Brahma so emphatically declares, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. He kind of emphatically says everything, whatever we kind of have to know about Krishna. He first of all declares that Ishvara Parama Krishna, that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and then he is Sachid Ananda Vigraha. He is a personality who is full of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. And then he says Anadiradir Govinda. He's the beginning and he is the end, and he is Govinda. And then he finally says he is the Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. And then he's the cause of all causes. The person who is the cause of all causes should also be the source of knowledge. So then next week, if we go to the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna himself declares. So first of all, we identified that through Brahma, who was the creator, that Krishna is the source of everything that happens. Sarva Karana Karanam. So now if we identify what Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, he says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam bhuda bhava samanvita. So if you go to that verse and see what Krishna is trying to tell us, he says, I am the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from him. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. He's saying like everything is from him. So when the entire, whatever that creation, both the spiritual and material verse, if it is part of him, then obviously the knowledge should also be part of him. And next, if you come to the next verse within the Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna says, Sarvyasya chaham hridisannivishto matta smritir jnanam apoham cha vedaischa sarver hameva vedyo vedantakrit veda videha chaham. Veda, we kind of, as we understand, is kind of the whole gamut of knowledge, whatever it is to be known, is kind of, in sometimes Srila Prabhupada even translates Veda as knowledge. So literally the Veda word meaning, it's not just the book, the compiled book that Vyasadeva has provided to us, but it kind of means in an overall sense, whatever the knowledge that we have to achieve. And here Krishna says, Vedas, he says that he's seated in everyone's heart, and from him comes the remembrance, knowledge, which we are trying to identify who is the source of knowledge. Here Krishna is very emphatically saying that from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So he's kind of the source of the knowledge here. And then he also says, through the Vedas, which is the approach of learning and then the knowledge that we are trying to achieve, it is, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of the Vedanta and I am the knower of the Vedas. So he is saying he is the knower of the Vedas. Vedas, as we just discussed, Vedas is not just about the Sama Veda, Yajur, and Atharva Vedas that we kind of know, but in one sense, the Vedas here refers to the whole entirety of knowledge that that is available. And then in one of the purports to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 6, verse 9, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the Vedic mantras say, Yasmin Vignate Sarvam Evam Vignatam Bhavati. This is from the Mundaka Upanishad 1.3. Srila Prabhupada writes, when Srila Prabhupada then translates this, the Sanskrit, Yasmin Vignate Sarvam Evam Vignatam Bhavati. Srila Prabhupada translates this as, when the devotee sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead by his meditation, or when he sees the Lord personally face to face, he becomes aware of everything within this universe. Indeed, nothing is unknown to him. So just by the vision of Supreme Personality of Godhead, we'll be in a situation where everything is kind of revealed to us. So obviously, if just by seeing somebody, if we're able to kind of get to know everything, then he, as Krishna himself has declared in Bhagavad Gita, he is the source of knowledge. And we practically see this example also in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, where once Dhruva Maharaj saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whatever his desires were, they all vanished. And then as he wanted to kind of speak in the glorification of the Lord, the moment when I forgot the personality whom. So when Vishnu touched Dhruva's head with his conch, then he started to glorify with very selective verses from using Sanskrit in very poetic way. And then again, if you go back to Srimad Bhagavatam, the first verse, which says, Tene Brahma Hridayadi Kavaye. So and Srila Prabhupada translates that as, it is he who only first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. So here also we kind of see that if Brahmaji was, as we kind of were discussing in the beginning, if Brahmaji being the creator of this whole material universe as we know it, kind of secondary creator in an overall sense, but if you just talk from the perspective of Brahmaji, what he has done, he's also created. And then, as it says here, it is he, which he refers here to the son of Vasudeva, Sri Krishna. It is he who only first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji. So it is kind of making it clear, Srila Prabhupada. These are some of the examples. Obviously, I'm sure all of you can quote many other examples also, kind of to emphasize the point that Krishna is the source of knowledge. So as we just discussed, so in the process of learning, many a times it might so happen nowadays where, unlike the previous traditional educational model, where we used to approach one specific teacher or one specific school, or in traditional old times, it was a gurukula where all the students of the specific community would go to the gurukula, would learn from the teacher, and then kind of move away from kind of once the whole learning process is completed, once the teacher feels that, hey, the student is now in a very good place where he can kind of assimilate, he has kind of has got in the process has got in the discipline of knowledge that he kind of can now, when he goes out into the world, he can still assimilate the knowledge because he currently has the discipline of knowledge that is imparted into him. So you would kind of let go of the student, and then the student would kind of continue to learn from every interaction that we used to do. But present days, many a times what happens is, there was this whole discussion that used to happen when, I'm sure if all of you know about the ISKCON Desiree. I was there in Mumbai when whole ISKCON Desiree was trying to come up, and then there was this discussion that was happening just within the ISKCON Desiree devotees who were trying to come up. Was also, there is a possibility that sometimes before ISKCON Desiree came up, most of us didn't have access to the classes, and it was a very rare occurrence that you kind of have access to even the classes of your spiritual master. So it was quite a lot of struggle. But after ISKCON Desiree came up, then there was kind of some fear where it was kind of thought, what if devotees will go on a shopping spree? Okay, today I want to hear from this devotee, tomorrow I want to hear from that devotee, rather than kind of following the original traditional educational model. And sometimes it so happens even in just the other case where there are some learning sites, kind of Udemy, and like I personally have this challenge where I try to search, I want to learn about this some specific topic, and then it comes up with like thousands of courses, and then many times you just get confused by how do I even approach this topic. So many a times just knowing the source of the knowledge, which is Lord Krishna, is important. But once we identify the source of this knowledge, as the verse, as Vidura is saying here to Maitreya, how could one have knowledge of devotional service and detachment without the help of such devotees? And as Srila Prabhupada also explains about who are those such devotees. So it's also important for us to understand how do we approach the teacher. And then again, obviously, we cannot see anything beyond the famous verse that Krishna explained to Arjuna, Tad viddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti tye jnanam jnaninas tattva darshina. So as Krishna is explaining here, it is not just about me trying to grab the knowledge. I think there is some purport in Bhagavatam where Srila Prabhupada talks about one famous spiritual movement in India where it is quoted that the spiritual master was sitting on a high chair, and then the disciple was sitting in front of him, and then there was some kind of electrical connection that happened. And once it so happened, after the whole transfer of the power that happened between the spiritual master and the disciple, the spiritual master at the end of the whole interaction felt very weak. He felt like everything that was within him is kind of lost, and then now the disciple has gained everything. So Srila Prabhupada kind of says in that purport, I'm not able to exactly remember the chapter and the words, it is in the first canto. Srila Prabhupada there, he says that this is not how the spiritual knowledge kind of transmits from the spiritual master to the disciple. It is not that we both of them sit, I sit in the Bhagavatam class when my spiritual master or any devotee is saying, and then at the end of the class, it will not be that everything that the devotee knows is kind of, I've received it, and then now the devotee has kind of forgot everything. So that will not be the case. So as Krishna says here, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. And as I think Gopal Hari Prabhu was also explaining yesterday, Balaram using the plow kind of makes Balaram, or the Guru, who is kind of an expansion of the Shakti of Balaram, or Lord Nityananda, uses the flow of his interactions with us, of the service that we do. Through the service that we are making our heart a much more fertile place where the Bhaktilata Bija can kind of grow very nicely. So it's not that where I can just forcefully learn and sit in some of the classes of my spiritual master and forcefully kind of grab the knowledge from him. That's not how it happens. It happens through Pariprashnena Sevya. We ask some questions, as we all see in the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam is basically kind of three things. One is the stories of Krishna, and then the second thing is glorifications of the devotees, and the third thing that happens is the questions that devotees ask. So every interaction that a devotee is having with Krishna in Bhagavatam, you'll obviously see some questions being asked, whether it could be Yudhishthira Maharaj, whether it could be Kunti Maharani, or like later on also, as it happens, it's always a dialogue, as we spoke even in my last class. It's always a dialogue that happens. So as we kind of were also discussing in the last class, every relationship kind of flourishes when there is a dialogue. So even in this whole process of learning, trying to learn from the spiritual master, it's a dialogue. We do pariprashna, we ask certain qualitative questions, and then it's not that once it is answered we'll understand everything that the spiritual master is trying to tell us through the seva. And there are so many examples also, just to emphasize this point. Also, one of the very famous stories of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where somebody who was a very famous Indian freedom fighter came to approach him with some questions, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, rather than answering him with those questions, all he said is, there is some service that needed to be done in the temple. Can you please go and wash the pots? And once he came up with the washing the pots, then he said, okay, there is some other service. So he just made sure that the person was doing service for the whole day. And at the end of the day, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur asked him, okay, now I am free, can you please ask your questions? He said, oh, all my questions are now answered. So it could be that maybe through the service, during the service, maybe he was discussing with some devotees, but that's not exactly how Srila Prabhupada and our teachers explain it to us, that he has understood those questions. By doing the service, all we kind of hear also is that the knowledge of spiritual world, and the spiritual knowledge is basically revealed knowledge. And when we do our service, then comes the part where we will be eligible to be, where Krishna feels, okay, now this person is eligible for me to reveal the knowledge to the extent that we have done the service. And also, as we see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the verse where Brahmanda Brahmita Kona Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasada Bhai, Bhakti Lata Beach. We also hear that we are roaming around the world, across the world, and then finally, through the mercy of Guru and Krishna, we'll become eligible to receive the Bhakti Lata Beach. We'll be able to approach the Bhakti Lata Beach, and then that's where it happens. And also we also see in the whole Canto 11, when one of the famous verse that comes, where it says Bhaktya Sanjataya Bhaktya. So we also hear in this famous verse which says Bhakti takes place through Bhakti. And we have also heard from the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, where he explains what does it mean that Bhakti takes birth from Bhakti. So he kind of explains that if as we just heard, that the source of knowledge is Krishna. So in that way, and it also says the source of everything is Krishna. So in that way, Krishna Sanjataya Bhakti should happen. But why does it say Bhaktya Sanjataya Bhaktya? So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that for us to give something to others, we should have it in our heart. So in the same way, Krishna doesn't have bhakti for himself, so obviously he cannot give it to us. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also explains that if Krishna is kind of given that he is very impartial. It's not that he chooses us. It's not that we were specifically chosen by Krishna. Okay, these 6 devotees across the Nepal should be only able to practice the devotional service. That's not the case. Krishna is very impartial. So because Krishna is impartial, he cannot choose and pick and choose people across, saying that he's eligible for bhakti, he's eligible for bhakti, she's eligible for bhakti, this guy is not eligible for bhakti. So Krishna will not do that. And in the same way, the pure devotee who is an Uttamadhikari, he will also not be able to do, because in everything that he sees some connection to Krishna, as Bhagavad Gita explains. He sees connection because we are all part and parcels of Krishna. So he always sees some connection with Krishna. And so it's not that that happens. So, but when a Madhyamadhikari, when a Madhyamadhikari approaches us, as it says, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai, through his mercy, we will be able to, that's how bhakti. So when it says bhaktya sanjataya bhaktya, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the bhakti in the heart of, when as we all see, all of us have this experience also, that we met some devotees either through book distribution, or we came to temple, or in some way some of our relatives happened to become devotees, and then we were discussing with him, and then through the bhakti in their heart kind of transferred into our heart. So it could potentially then raise a question that, oh, there are millions of people to whom Srila Prabhupada met. Then why is it so that only some of them became devotees? Then in that question, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains one more point. I think we are almost at the end of the time. I'll tell a small story, and then through the story we can kind of try to understand how is it that the bhakti in the heart of one devotee kind of gets transferred into the other devotee. So this is basically a story of a thief. His name is Govardhan. So as these thieves are very famous for, he stole something from the king's palace, and then as he was running from the guards, he identifies there is a huge sangha that is happening in one of the houses, and then he runs into the house. And when he ran into the house, then he hides himself in one of the corners, where even if the guards come, that he'll not be visible. And it so happens that the guards come, he's not identified, and then the guards leave. And through this all thing, he was hearing the whole katha that was happening there. And it so happened that the katha that was being told was from Srimad Bhagavatam. And he was describing how the jewelry that Lord Krishna was wearing, and then I'll speed up. I think we're almost at the end of the thing. And then he gets interested to steal the whole jewelry, because he thought, this is just a little boy that I can just steal. And then he follows the devotee, asks him, okay, where can I find this boy? And then the devotee gets very scared, and then he says, at least in Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that this boy, along with his brother, live in Vrindavan. And then from whichever place that he was, he walks all the way to Vrindavan, approaches Vrindavan by the night, and then waits in one of the sits on top of one of the tree, and then waits for Krishna and Balram. And then the next morning, it so happens that the Krishna Balram actually come. He first of all is in deep sleep, and then the first thing that he hears is the flute sound of Krishna. And then he wakes up, and then he sees that from far away place, Krishna and Balram are actually walking towards him. And then the moment he sees Krishna and Balram, his heart gets transformed, as was in the case of Dhruva Maharaj. His heart gets transformed, and then he thinks, how can I even steal something from this boy? And then he gets down, and then he sees Krishna as he approaches closer, and then he identifies that, hey, from the list of the jewelries that were mentioned in Bhagavatam, this boy is missing one of the jewelry. And then he says, what happened? And then Krishna says, maybe I just forgot about it today. And then because his whole heart transformed, he didn't want it to kind of snatch the whole jewelry. But so was in the case of Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva kind of let go of his desire for the whole big kingdom, but Vishnu reminds him to him. So was in the case of Govardhan. He forgot, he kind of lost the desire for taking the whole jewelry, but Krishna reminds him. And then Krishna says, take away the whole jewelry. And then he says, no, I don't want. Then he says, my mother is okay. You can just take the whole jewelry. And then he comes back to the devotee with the whole bag of jewelry. And then he says, oh, I met Krishna and Balram. The devotee says, oh, it's not possible that you can meet Krishna and Balram. He says, if you want the proof, then see the whole jewelry that I've received from him. And the moment the devotee sees the jewelry, he becomes amazed. He says, I've been praying to Lord Krishna to have a darshan, and I never had the darshan, but here you are. And then he goes to Vrindavan, and then even in that instance also, Govardhan was able to see Lord Krishna and Balram, but the devotee was not able to even see or interact. And then he prays, so why is it that, my Lord, I've been meditating on Bhagavatam for so long, but why is it that I'm not able to have your darshan? And then Krishna says, that in your case, you're just reading Srimad Bhagavatam. But in the case of Govardhan, he has that faith that whatever is written in Bhagavatam is true. And then that's where Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur brings the whole point of discussion of Bhaktya Sanjataya Bhaktya. He says, Adhau Shraddha. So as we know, the first step in our devotional service was Adhau Shraddha. So it is because it's not that the potency of the devotee is less. It's not that. But when Srila Prabhupada met these devotees who later on went on to become his disciples or his devotees, there was a lot of potency in Srila Prabhupada, but in other instances there was not a lot of potency in Srila Prabhupada. That's not the case. The case is that for those devotees who were there, they had faith in what Srila Prabhupada was saying, but in the other case, maybe at that instance, we also hear that many of these devotees who are disciples of Srila Prabhupada, they met Srila Prabhupada 3, 4, 5 times, and on some day their hearts got transformed. So it's the same potency of Srila Prabhupada, but their hearts became fertile because they started to kind of gain faith through their experiences of meeting devotees or whatever is the experience that they had. And once we have that Adho Shraddha, which is the starting point of bhakti, once we have that Shraddha, that's when we'll be able to appreciate and be able to recipient of the Guru Krishna Prasada. We'll be able to receive the mercy of Guru and Krishna. And that's how we will be able to, as Vidura is explaining here, how could one have knowledge of devotional service and detachment without the help of such devotees? And once we are able to have that faith on devotees, then that's when we will be able to kind of approach the help that is being given by the devotees through the parampara. As Srila Prabhupada explains, through the parampara, we will be able to help ourselves and maybe in some way help Srila Prabhupada also in this movement. And I've taken 5 minutes more than what was allotted. But thank you so much, dear devotees. If there is any correction or any comments that you would like to make, please.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nice class. I think the first part of the class you were talking about how Krishna is the what do you call the knowledge, right? From the knowledge is the source of knowledge. So I mean, I was 2 verses came to me, Raja Vidya, Raja Guhyam, and in the 7th chapter, the other verse, 2nd verse, I think. I mean, he is the source of both phenomenal and numinous,
Correct.
right? So after
Correct.
knowing this, nothing to be known. So of
Yeah.
course, yeah, I mean, he is declaring very bold. Right? So
Yeah.
those 2 statements came to me also.
Yeah. I think sometimes Prabhupada also says that Krishna is declaring very boldly that he is there, and then we have challenge with that also. Like, how can you even say that he is? And Srila Prabhupada says it is his creation, so he's just saying the fact. It's not that he is making up a fact.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhuji, we are really blessed and fortunate to have devotees like you in our congregation. Such a wonderful class today morning. You should be speaking every day, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
I get inspired by all of your classes, Prabhu. I don't attend in the morning because sometimes I have calls, but I make it a point where I go back and listen to classes. So I'm blessed to, as I was saying in one of my previous classes also, one of the great blessings of moving to Naperville is able to speak on Bhagavatam. So I'm kind of blessed to be amongst all of you. Thank you for continuing this tradition.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for sharing your Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, if no more sharings, maybe we can end.
Yes, bro.
Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo